Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And CCP pretty much just dropped an EVE pulse, so we got a little bit of extra information about the anniversary, the 17th anniversary for EVE Online that's coming. They'll celebrate that with a new event, a battle cruiser only event. Well, I kind of like those ship restrictions in these events because something like frigate and destroyers, you know, very alpha clone friendly, very accessible as well, pretty low price. But if you want to splurge, you can make an overpowered ship. Or they can go, now they're going with battle cruisers, which I think is still pretty affordable and doable, but it's gonna be a little bit different, slower pace, things like that. So yeah, I kind of like that. Lots of rewards that will be temporary in nature, definitely something that CCP seems to be trying lately as well. On skins, I personally really don't like it, but for boosters, SP boosters and things like that, I think it does make sense to keep things restricted in time so you don't get hoarding and things like that. That happens, and then like trying to game the system basically. But we'll see, some more events coming. That is of course pretty cool. Also some skin stuff announced, except it wasn't going to come just yet, so I don't think we'll see any sales here. We do still have the, oh, there they are finally. Last week they weren't here yet, but the Dragon Phoenix skins, look at that on the Ishtar. I think that looks pretty good. The shiny red and black, one of my personal favorite combinations of colors. I think that looks really amazing, especially when it's like a little bit dark here, but very shiny. Some white stripes on that, pretty cool. I like these. Brutix Phoenix skin also looks really amazing in my opinion, and if I'm not mistaken, this is actually a skin that was first developed for the Chinese server that is now being brought over here. So you've got it for the Gila as well, you know, the most popular PvE hulls right there in my opinion. Really pretty cool, and I actually really like these skins. And then down here we've got some bundles, but we don't really have sales or anything like that. If I'm not mistaken, like 3 days we should see some skins going for like 17 plex or something like that, is what I thought was mentioned in the Pulse video. Should be pretty cheap, should be a pretty steep sale, and of course all that around the anniversary. Let's see what all of that gives, including login rewards. CCP tries to keep those going as well, and someone actually asked in a comment what I thought about the login rewards. Now, I don't mind them, but the last one here, of course, that's been going on feels a little bit weird. While you do see that you're gathering up a nice pool of SP, all of those tiny BPCs for like guns and things like that doesn't make that much sense. I don't feel like any of that is really rewarding or even worth it to put in there. Then just put the SP and that's it, if that's the route you're going. Temporary skins, don't like that, as I've said. I feel like, you know, skins, especially when you pay for them, they should just be permanent. But yeah, the SP is of course always welcome. I'm especially now starting to think if my second character that I have on the account, which is actually a scout that I'm using for wormhole space, if I can give him some of that SP and maybe get him to do PI as well and blueprint copies, just to try and scale that up a little bit. I don't want to spook the market too much, but I think there is definitely room for some more growth in income there as well. Anyways, let's move on to the market, the main reason why everyone is here, of course, and we are going to start with plex and stuff at 4 minutes. Like that. Oh, god damn it, I just hit my microphone. Sorry about that, guys. Hope it doesn't come through too much. But let's get started here with plex. And yeah, in Jita, 2,740,000, and just a while ago we were actually competing with the player-owned trade hubs as well, where we go down to less than 2.7 million for a plex. That starts to be pretty damn low, something we haven't seen in a pretty long time. And where is the calculator? I'm quickly gonna just do the 2687 123 and do that times 500. Oh, I have to press it like that, I guess. No. 1.34 billion ISK for 30 days game time from the sell orders, by the way. You can probably go a little bit lower than that. Let's do 2.6 million maybe. Let's assume that you can grab Plex for 2.6 million. Is that too much? Nope, that's correct. And I will do that times 500. God damn it. 2.6 million times 500 brings us down to a cool 1.3 billion ISK for 30 days game time. This is the lowest we have seen it in a very long time, and I think considering these prices, it is definitely doable. 2.5 million for the buyers in Cheetah, and we go to a little bit below 2.6 million as well for the sellers. So if we look at the chart here, we continue to decline. Very, very pronounced 1 year low point. Still has some momentum. I thought maybe after this leg down or this leg down, we would stop at 3 million, we would stop at 275. No, we are going even lower. What's the reason for that? In fact, to my surprise, I even got an email asking me this very specific question. Usually you get lots of buzz and lots of activity when we reach high points and Plex become very, very expensive. Now you actually have people asking what the hell is going on. I'm losing a lot of value in my Plex investments now that the prices are going down. That's a little bit funny to me, because you finally have cheap Plex. You finally have, you know, you don't have to do too much grinding in order to earn your 30 days game time. It feels really amazing, I think, for players in general. They should see nice affordability compared to what it was a year ago. But people do wonder, of course, what's happening. And I can't give you guys any real data or anything like that. I can only speculate that it is right now basically a perfect storm, a mix of things that are happening. Number one, in my opinion, is that we don't have a FanFest. FanFest is usually a big boost in hype with a trailer that, like, I mean, it was an amazing trailer, don't get me wrong, but it still feels a little bit different than when it drops from FanFest, where you get a real full roadmap, stuff to expect, lots of talk, lots of hype. That usually boosts Plex at least for a little bit, and we don't have that at all this year. Next up, the fight against bots. CCP's number is that they took out, in their opinion, 80% of bots and bot-generated wealth. That should have a pretty big impact on just general ISK inflation in the game, and that should also, of course, mean lower prices for Plex. I think that the resource changes, where they now announced the drought phase, has a big impact on this as well. It is basically forcing a lot of ISK to flow into minerals, to flow into the resources, and as a result there's less ISK to speculate on Plex, less ISK that flows into the Plex market, and so we get this decline in price for that as well. I also still think that perhaps ISK generation might be on the menu for the resource drought, so I think some people might be speculating on that as well, saying if that happens, it's good to be in cash and it's not good to be in Plex, in goods, in, well, gold, you could say, in general. And so that's another factor. And I think just the general real life situation, of course, means lots of players, but also lots of players that don't have a lot of other activities to spend their money on, which could be increasing the supply of Plex substantially as well, with that increased activity that we are seeing in the game. You can see that the volumes are up. I don't think that this is too much to do with sales at the moment, and so right now, very, very cheap Plex. I've been saying since we've reached the 3 million mark, I think it would make sense to buy, but I think I almost always mentioned that I would not put all my ISK in the basket right now. Slowly buy up at these low points, I think does make sense, especially now. 1.3 billion for 30 days game time, 2.6 million, anything for that price or below that price, I think is really tremendous opportunity. The chart says it as well. But don't empty your wallet and pour everything into plex just yet. It might be a little bit early for that. Give yourself the chance that if we go even lower, you can buy even more. That's the way I look at it. But it is very, very interesting and really amazing to see. I couldn't give you guys like percentages on all of these reasons that I personally see as to why plex is down. How big of an impact is the fight against bots? It could be really major. Maybe another one that just springs to mind is of course that there's going to be a reopening of or has been a reopening of the EVE Online server in China, which could mean that a part of the player base is moving over there. A part of the player base, I mean, that is notorious for being super competitive, even if that means trying to skate around the rules a little bit as well. So overall, that could be another impact here. It looks like, well, if we look at this chart, a perfect storm for a lower prices of plex is here. I would say that this is also, of course, an opportunity. Next up, let's take a look at the multiple pilot train certificate. That one, of course, is forced down as well. If you can get plex for 1.3 billion, you can get a multiple pilot train certificate. The buyers are at less than 1.3 billion, and then the sellers are going for a bit above 1.3 billion. Very much in line with the price of plex at the moment. Not a lot of buyers, not a lot of sellers. Volumes have been down substantially. This is all pretty damn normal, of course. This is an item that has a much more limited use than plex itself, that can be converted to many other things. But if you're looking to skill up a second character at the same time, then this is the item to go for. I think a buy order a bit above 1.2. Let's see what it's like in the player on trade ups. Yeah, a bit below 1.3 billion, so slightly cheaper than plex at the moment. Could very easily get that going. As I've said, I'm actually thinking of doing one other character for PI and for blueprint copies, but I tend to be a one character kind of player, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do it. Next up here, we've got the skill extractors. These of course follow the same trend as plex. We start at 500 million ISK and now we're landing on 300 million ISK. Very nice as well, of course. 300 million for the sellers, 295 for the buyers. A first sign that we may be closing in on a bottom, perhaps. At some point the market says, you know, that's really low enough. This is where I am going to start to pour a lot of ISK into this market again. Could be 300 million for the skill extractors, 1.3 billion for 500 plex. All of that does make sense. There is a psychological aspect to the market as well, of course, and round numbers do tend to be something that the market looks at, but be warned, we might have thought the same thing when we reached 300 million on this downtrend, and when we saw this resurgence, then we could think the same at 275 million, and now we're heading for 2.5 million on this chart as well. So this is not science, this is trying to read the market, and here we do have a closing of the gap between sellers and buyers. 3 million to 295 million is definitely a pretty narrow margin for the size of the price tag for skill extractors. On the skill injector market, we're seeing a continued slowdown trend. We're definitely playing with the 1-year lows as well. Part of this is going to be, of course, the plex prices that are coming through, and it's a bit of a surprise that it's not more of a downtrend than what we're seeing now. And on top of that, CCP has of course been very generous with skill points, so all of that is also creating a decline from 1 billion at the start of the year, and we're heading for 750 million ISK on the chart. We're still a bit away from that, but we are talking 770 million for the sellers and 731 million for the buyers. You can probably grab large skill injectors for less than 750 if you're aggressive enough and close enough to that price tag, which I think is also another opportunity to grab some of these on the cheap, but it fully depends on what you expect the market to do. Of course, this is your choice. I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do. The chart looks very juicy. It always feels very risky, of course, to make moves like that, especially with larger items that still cost almost 1 billion ISK to invest in. But This could be like really a double take, where if you're expecting ISK inflation to continue to come back, whatever you want to say, then Plex looks in a really good spot. Consider that a little bit the gold of EVE Online. And then of course the skill injectors, at some point perhaps CCP could try something else when it comes to the daily login rewards, the rewards for events and things like that. In fact, we're starting to see them try to diversify that a little bit. In my opinion, not exactly in the right way, with stuff like those limited time skins and things like that, but CCP is looking at perhaps we could do some other things as a reward structure, and so that could mean that a need for skill points could increase yet again. Combine that with an increase in Plex, and of course large skill injectors look potentially very, very interesting. After that, we've got the small skill injectors that were doing some weird stuff, basically going up when the large ones were going down. So we had a little bit of a difference in behavior. That seems to be gone now. On the 20-day moving average, you can see that we are also continuing to go down, and we just broke through the 160 million mark on the chart. 154 million for the first seller, 158 for more for most of them, and 146 million for the buyers as well. If we look at this full 1 year chart again, 150 plus, we started at 210 million ISK, a very nice decline as well, showing you, in my opinion, the potential rewards upside of small scale injectors to be pretty damn generous. And this is of course far more affordable, doable than the large scale injector, which costs 800 million ISK. Still, almost, that is, you know, a lot of it to pour in one item. A small scale injector, honestly, one lucky site in HiSec, in 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10 with the right faction item, and you could exchange that straight for a small scale injector and have that investment ready as well. So this feels like it's a lot more affordable, doable, which I think is also the reason why you've got a little bit more volatility. While we saw this difference in attitude, you could say here in the 5-day moving average, and especially the daily moving averages for this item. Daily trades have also gone up towards 750 a day for the large scale injectors. It is still 5,000 a day, and we also see an upswing here in volume. So no, I can't exactly explain it that well, but I think it is because it is far more doable to invest and to gamble on the small scale injectors and what they'll do in price. Finally, we also have the daily alpha injectors that are continuing to slowly pull away from the 40 million mark. We're talking 37.5 million for the sellers and 33 million for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin here, and yeah, we started the year at 70 million ISK. Keep one thing in mind, this might look like the one that has a 100% potential almost from this chart, but it is different from everything else because only alpha clones can use this. So it is a much smaller market to try and trade this item into. And then for the last item, of course, we've got the hypercore that is continuing to decline below 300,000 ISK. Yep, 295,000 for the sellers, 256,000 for the buyers. This is, of course, no longer just a decline in hypernet activity, which might be the reason why we have this slow decline from the start, 380 to 350, and then we definitely started to move below the 350 range. But now, of course, Plex is going to have an impact on this one as well. Personally, not something that I would gamble on for the hypercores, because I don't use a hypernet. I don't have any feeling whether or not this is being used a lot, whether it's successful, what kind of numbers we're seeing, if there's any trends there. So I'm steering away from the hypercores. I'm seeing it a little bit as a barometer for that part of the game, which honestly people were very worried about it. I have not noticed anything really when it comes to the impact of the hypernet on the game, on the market. Very, very easy for me personally to just let that go and to ignore it as part of my experience in EVE Online. Let's move on to the minerals next, coming up in at 1835. Whoa, that's actually pretty long segments considering the last couple of weeks, but here we go. Let's start off with titanium. That is continuing to slowly decline, and we are actually in a wrong chart here. Continuing to slowly decline, landing or actually breaking through the 9 ISK barrier at the very tail end of the chart here, and today's daily average is definitely a lot lower. We are talking about 8.86, 8.9 ISK for titanium for the sellers, 8.18 for the buyers, a bit more margin opening up there as well. We're definitely starting to trade between 8 and 9 at this point, and something that's going to help keep that situation going is of course the 2 billion units that are still coming in here at 886, someone dumping quite a bit of titanium to the market. I also do think that lots of players have found their way towards that activity, probably in HiSec as well. We could be seeing more just easy mining, maybe even alpha clone mining that is increasing supply. This is of course very normal. 9 ISK for titanium was really amazing, and something that people are taking full advantage of. It's still pretty damn close to that. 886 is actually still an incredibly high price for titanium. Next up here we've got pyrite. Very impressive to see how we're holding on to that 7 to 8 ISK, and we're pretty much flat for the last 2 months. Considering what titanium is doing, this is actually a little bit surprising, but pretty damn impressive. 760 to 770 for the sellers, 718 for the buyers, so we're strongly above the 7 ISK, and it seems like we're able to defend that range with decent volumes, regular volumes going on a daily basis as well. For the Mexilon chart, went up to 70, and we are trying to defend that. 71 ISK for the sellers and 67 ISK for the buyers. A bit of a margin opening up here again, but what's going to normally keep this doable is the fact that outside of this 123 million sell order, we basically have relatively low volumes unless you head for the 73 ISK range already. So this really is a sign that supplies have gone down, and that we're here for the higher prices, which should again increase activity in mining. So some pressure is normal, but actually pretty impressive to see sellers stay well above 70 ISK for Mexilon as well. Next up here we've got Isogen, trying to defend 20 ISK, failed right at the tail end, but 5-day moving average here is actually trying to get back up there as well. 1957 for the sellers and 1853 for the buyers. How low do we have to go? Well, 20 ISK is already in view. 60 million, 40 million, those are definitely decent volumes. And what Isogen might still be suffering from a little bit is of course the historical stocks. I think if there's one mineral that was the major casualty for the plentiful time that we had when it comes to mining with Rorcal, with Nullsec becoming very self-sustaining, able to grab everything in massive volumes, it was Isogen that was being overproduced massively. This stuff used to be worth like 150 ISK, double what Mexilon was worth. So the fact that we went up to 20 is not even that impressive. The fact that we're really struggling to maintain any price or to see an increase rise there as well does, in my opinion, indicate that there's still people just dumping, slowly dumping their Isogen as close to 20 ISK as possible, and that there are still large stocks lagging behind out there. Perhaps we will need a CCP intervention for Isogen, where next to like increasing the need for what's being mined from moons at the moment, they could also look into increasing the need for Isogen in the production cycles, because you get less Isogen normally per cubic meter than you get Mexilon, and then to see this much of a difference, right, less than a third of the price for the Isogen really does show that it's a massive glut. If there was also one gamble that you would want to take in minerals, it is to have and create big stocks of Isogen on the off chance that that will happen. But that is a very big gamble, of course. You do need CCP to decide that they want Isogen to return to its former glory, to be worth more than Mexilon, and that would require, I think, them either really cutting down on its availability, although I think that you know, considering the stocks, that could take a very long time to actually have an impact, or they could increase the need of isogen in production in general, thus boosting the price as well. I still think, considering all of the other minerals, that is a possibility. But I don't have any information that would indicate that. This is my personal gamble on something that might happen in the mineral market. Next up here we got Noxium, 343 for the sellers, 332 for the buyers. Buyers definitely forced up a little bit here as well, and so we are able to stay back clear from that 300 isk high average for like last year or so. Back towards the 350 range. So we did decline a little bit, basically a little bit too much happening here on the supply side, and we're now recovering that, and we're still paying that premium 340 plus for Noxium at the moment, which is of course the consequence of the drought phase. I think why hasn't Noxium gained as much as, let's say, Titanium? It is relatively easy to transport, so pretty small in volume, in need as well, and so as a result you don't have that problem, and on top of that it is very producible throughout almost all spaces, including big parts of HiSec. And so Noxium does have supplies coming in from everywhere that are able to basically stabilize the situation a little bit more. When it comes to Zydrine and Megasite, we were on the upswing and we are continuing on the upswing. We're now at 800 isk on the chart for Zydrine, 823 for the sellers, 741 for the buyers. A bit of a margin starts to open up here, so we may be overshooting it, but seeing Zydrine at 800 isk does mean that it is basically back at its range, I think from before moon mining, where it dropped off to 500 and even 400 isk. That was kind of crazy. Now Zydrine has been 1100 and more as well, but this is definitely a very nice comeback, and one of the consequences of the changes to moon mining, I think that is now really starting to shine through. One thing that's still weird, of course, Zydrine used to be less expensive than Megasite. Megasite's still lagging behind, but it looks like that trend is also starting. You can now see that we are starting to get up above 550, 555 for the sellers, 504 for the buyers. So the former Nalsic minerals are regaining some of their former glory. That price and their value is definitely going up, and I would say that that is very good news, because seeing Megasite drop down to 300 isk did feel kind of bad for the producers of this item. We also had this constant, very regular supply of 4 million, 5 million units, and like dozens and dozens of orders every single day, because people, all they had to do really was pop up a refinery on a moon in HiSec in a 0.5 system, and there you go, you had really safe, very easy to get supplies that would constantly be flooding the market to ever lower prices. Definitely also one of the major casualties in the later phase of the plentiful time in EVE Online once moon mining came to HiSec, that really gutted the value of Megasite and of Zydrine. And Zydrine, very, very impressive, of course, seeing that one make its way back to 800 isk. After that, we have the Morphite market that is continuing to stay on its high points, went to 20,000 isk last week, gives back a little bit of that ground, but we're still talking about 18,500 isk to 19,000 isk for the sellers, and almost 16,000 for the buyers. Of course, a very strong one-year performance. That would have been an insane trade if we could have grabbed this for 7,500 isk and then had the patience to wait a full year. But who would have known a year ago that CCP would be really doing a 180 on the self-reliance of 0.0 and really trying to stem the tide, the flood of goods that was decreasing value across the board. But here it is, and very impressive comebacks in some of these minerals. A different story in the PI market, at least in the last couple of months. We're talking 2755. And of course, the PI market has been struggling quite a little bit with a lack of demand. Supply decently steady, might even be up a little bit now that activity is increasing. And what are you going to do as a baseline in EVE Online if you decide that I'm in it for the long haul? It is of course to establish some PI, because it is a relatively passive income with potentially very good rewards, of course. Now the broadcast nodes are coming back down a little bit. We're still talking 2.1 million for the sellers and 2 million for the first buyer, but 1.9 million for most buyers. That is pretty low, of course. So here again showing that lack of demand a little bit. In the broadcast nodes we're going back to a less than average price. Now, a bit more noticeable here in the construction blocks. You can see that we're struggling in fall to stay above 10,000 disc. A little bit of a resurgence January, February, but to no avail. Here starting March we continue to decline, and now we are at a pretty low price range again. 9,000 disc for the sellers, 8,500 disc for the buyers. And notice this again, that competition in the sell market, despite the fact that we are this low, we still see people just dumping it for less than 9,000 disc because they want to be sure that they can get rid of these 19,000 units. After that it's 9,700 disc, but look at that, still almost a full page of orders below 10,000 disc trying to get rid of their construction blocks at almost any cost. If I were making this one, I would be hoarding and waiting for better times, but you know, lots of impatience in this as well. And as a result, despite the fact that 9,000 disc is pretty much below the entire chart by quite a bit, especially in the first half of the year here, this is really showing the lack of demand as well. Here is all of the supply. That's quite a decent amount. And then those buyers, they're staying 8,500. We're not going above that. We're having some competition around there, but you know, not that many buy orders compared to all of these sell orders, of course. Consumer electronics, an even worse chart, right? The problem started in fall as well. Normally 12,500 disc is a good average for consumer electronics. We went down to like 11k, and then here in February, March, struggling even with that, and now we're talking 9,000 disc probably on average for consumer electronics. 10,000 for the sellers. They're trying to get back up there. 8,600 for the buyers, but again 110,000 units coming in here less than 24 hours ago at just above 10,000. This is really going to keep this from going back towards an 11 or even 12,500 disc average, of course. So this is really showing the supplies are too large for the demand side of the PI market. In coolants, a little bit better. Coolants is tied to fuels, and despite the fact that you can see as well that nitrogen fuel blocks are really going down even lower, 17,500 disc. Haven't seen that in a very long time. That is really cheap fuel at the moment. Coolants is doing okay, 12,000 disc average for the whole year. Where are we at now? 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Of course, there is going to be a little bit of pressure, I think, because of the general situation of the PI market, but this is still a very respectable performance for coolants. There are some exceptions, of course. Here is the cryoprotectant solutions. On this 1 year chart, it looks really amazing. Why is this? Because, of course, it is needed in a lot of the new implants that CCP has been bringing into the game in the last couple of months. So we end up to 300,000 disc. Now we are back in a more stable phase. Lately, we haven't seen that many new implants come in, but we are still talking 160,000 disc for the sellers, 140,000 for the buyers. So still a pretty nice premium compared to the 100,000 normal price range for cryoprotectant solutions. This, of course, is also meaning that I think some people are moving away from, let's say, construction blocks or consumer electronics and heading towards the cryoprotectant solution market. But at this point, I'm really not seeing that supply crunch or this being a large enough impact for the rest of the PI market. And that's, of course, because this is one, maybe a couple of products that are impacted here, but across the board, demand has been too low for a decently long time. Enriched uranium next, tied to fuels, also struggling a little bit at the tail end, considering what we've seen in the fall period for some of these other goods. This is still a decently good chart. Right now we're talking almost 13,000 for the sellers and almost 12,000 for the buyers. Of course, a bit of pressure as well, but definitely not that bad. Integrity response drones tied to the production of structures. I think at this point all hope is lost that we will get any real structure or massive structure change that is going to require lots of production, lots of demand for advanced PI materials, something like a new structure to be deployed or something like that, preferably in the 3 versions, right? L, ML, and then the extra large ones. That is not on the horizon anymore, and as a result, the speculation that we had seen before FanFest here in early March is really over. A bit of extra dumping probably happening as well from people that did speculate on an announcement like that, and as a result now those poor integrity response drones are staying well below 2.2 million, almost 2.2 for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. And look at the competition here again as well. This is all of the supply, so that's the availability. This is the demand, JITA and the Tranquility Trade Tower. A very big difference, of course. Mechanical parts next, also struggling, but considering its ease of production, I'm going to say, managing to stay above 10,000 disc is impressive. 10,000 to 10,500 for the sellers, almost 10,000 for the buyers as well. This is actually, in my opinion, not that bad. I produce mechanical parts myself. This is very easily produced from barren planets that are very common throughout the game. So despite the fact that this 1 year chart is showing pressure, 10,000 disc for mechanical parts is actually not that bad. So tied to fuels does show that it comes with a little bit more stability. You don't have the high peaks, but you also do not always have the same lows as other PI products. Organic mortar applicators, a little bit of the same story as the response drones. Here you get that speculation in March again, going up to 1.1 million on average. I really think that this is what happened. People thought, if CCP comes out with an announcement on structures, I want to be ready, I want to take those profits, and now all that hope is pretty much gone, and so we're back to less than 1 million ISK for the average price. In fact, sellers are coming in with a decent number, 16,000 units below a million. That is definitely a bit of a desperate dump here as well, and almost 900,000 ISK for the buyers. Your average price is pretty low right now if you want to produce some structures. For robotics, there are exceptions, of course. Robotics is tied to fuels, and this one is really not doing well. 100,000 disc should be its normal average. You can see that we started struggling again in the fall, going to that 90,000 disc range. Able to defend that for a little bit, but here in March again, another leg down to 85,000 as the average price. 85,000 for the sellers, 82,000 for the buyers. Pretty cheap robotics right now. Well, you can't have all PI materials tied to fuels, I think, do decently well, able to sell around their average price and then get the fuel prices that we're seeing right now. So of course ICE is still a part of the equation as well, but general pressure is definitely the name of the game right now. Self-harmonizing power cores really showing that pattern here. January, February, March, 3 spikes. Look at the volumes here as well. Definitely some speculation here. In fact, this latest, the last spike here drove down activity in the market to unseen levels, right? Really low activity here in the volumes. And then what happened, I think, FanFest was not coming through. We got the trailer, no concrete information on new structures, and then we get this resurgence that was actually massive dumping, and then we went down to a 1 year low point right here, down to 1.75 million. We're recovering a little bit from that, but we're staying pretty clear of the 2 million on our average price. In fact, sellers are below 2 million ISK and the buyers are at around 1.9 million. For the superconductors, as I've said, there are some exceptions, and this is very lucky for me because I produce superconductors on on 2 storm planets on my main, and this one actually went up here in April to like 17,000 disc pretty easily. Right now we are coming back from that, but 12,000 to almost 13,000 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. This is actually a normal average price for superconductors. And the reason why I said, you know, if I were producing construction blocks or consumer electronics, I would not be doing these dump dumps of 110,000 units right now. The reason is because I had this experience with superconductors. We did struggle through the fall here as well, 10,000 disk and below, and I said no, I'm not going to sell here. Once the prices got back, I was ready with really big stocks of superconductors in GTA itself, and then I actually started to slowly sell in batches of 10,000 disk as the prices went up, and I got a really good price for my production. Patience does often pay off in the market in EVE Online. Not always, I have to be honest. When it comes to the test cultures, we had a very strong performance in April here as well, surging up to 15,000. This is a price we had not seen in a very long time for test cultures, but right now we do seem to be back down substantially, very violently as well, on a bit of massive dumping. Two really big volume spikes here have driven the price back down. It is still 10,000 disk for the sellers, which considering the full 1 year chart is not that bad, and almost 9,000 disk for the buyers as well. But what a strong performance right here all of a sudden, pretty impressive. 10,000, probably a normal price for test cultures, in line with the mechanical part, I think, in ease of production. And finally we get to wetware mainframes that yet again confirms the advanced PI material trend here, where we had that speculation before FanFest and then a bit of a giving up from speculators driving the price back. In this case, to an average, a little bit below 2.2 million for the sellers and 2.1 to 2 million for most buyers. But again, showing that very big difference. This is all the buyers. I can't even browse, so we're talking maybe a dozen buy orders, and here are the sellers. So yeah, the pressure should be on for wetware mainframes to try and drive the price back to a less than average price. We don't really see a resurgence here anytime soon. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 40 minutes. There we go. And let's see what's happening over here. We had increased prices like in the last couple of weeks or a couple of weeks ago. Was there any reason for that? I think it was a bit of speculation on the resource drought that you know, this segment would be hit as well. Right now, crystalline carbonite going back down. I think that speculation may be over a little bit. 163 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. Back on an average price seems decently normal. Fernite carbide, here you get that spike in April that I was talking about to 1 year high point, almost 190 on a couple of days. We're back on the 150 range on the chart, 150 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers. A pretty average price yet again. Then we have our titanium carbide that was far more stable, is actually diving down to 150, bringing it in line with the other carbide type materials, but for titanium is actually pretty cheap. 162 for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. Definitely trading at a low range for the good itself, but keep in mind that both of the previous ones are back in the exact same range. And then we've got tungsten carbide finally. That's actually going up a little bit at the tail end. Interesting. 210 to 17 to 18 for a lot of sellers. 192 for the buyers. I would say if you bought some low points below 175 for tungsten carbide, you have a sell opportunity right now. But across the board, we are seeing basically a landing back on average prices. Let's see what's happening with the metamaterials. Here are the photonic metamaterials. Did go up as well here. So as I've said here in April, on that resource shortage announcement from CCP, we did see those prices increase up to 20,000 disk, and now we're back towards 17.5k. The average price on the chart, 18,000 for the sellers, 16,500 for the buyers. Yeah, back on an average price. After that, we've got our plasmonic metamaterials. Here is the April spike that was digested very quickly, maybe overshot a little bit by supply, and now we're actually coming back. 22,500. I would say that could be the average price. 24,000 for the sellers, 20,000 for most buyers. We're back on the average range yet again. For the non-linear metamaterials tied to Caldari production, so also tied to the titanium carbide market, struggling a little bit more. We definitely don't have a noticeable spike in April, but at 22,500, again coming back in line with all the other photonic, all the other metamaterials, excuse me. 23 23,000 for the sellers, 22,000. Much lower margin here as well, much more stable basically. And then finally the terahertz metamaterials, counter to what's happening in the carbides, are actually struggling a little bit, going back down to 20,000 on average for the sellers, 19,000 for the buyers. So here, bit of stabilization, I would say, in this segment of the market. Not something where I would say, yeah, we could be considering buying right now. Maybe a little bit of sell opportunity in tungsten carbide on some surprise volatility, but across the board, things look to be stabilizing. Let's see if this is confirmed in the rest of the market. Well, for fermionic condensates, volume spike is crashing the price to 80k. 89,000 for the sellers, 76,000 for the buyers. Look at the difference between sellers and buyers as well. You could try to buy fermionic condensates below 80,000 disk. I think that would make sense all of a sudden. Next up, we've got ferrogel. That is basically struggling to get back to that 45,000 or even 50,000 average range right now. 39,000 for the sellers, 37,000 for the buyers. If you want a longer term investment, you could probably still be trying to grab this as well. Next up here we get fullerenes, and a surprise different reaction here as well. Shooting up to the moon here, 1600 on today's daily average. That's kind of weird, but yeah, a complete lack of supply is driving the sell price up to 1600 disk. Buyers coming in at 1263 and then the first one at 1500 as well. So a bit of a fullerenes drought is creating a pretty big opportunity. You could have bought this for like 900 disk on a couple of occasions across the years, across the last year. If you were, patient enough, you can try to sell for close to 1600 disk. That would be pretty good. Bit of a surprise. Hypersynaptic fibers. Coming back down on the other hand, back below average, with less than 11,000 for the sellers, 10,500 for the first buyer. Nano transistors landing on 6k, which is back on its pretty good price for the summer, 6,140 and 6,100 for the buyers. Basically a little bit expensive considering the full 1 year chart, but doing pretty well. Phenolic composites still right around its 2000 average, so that's not really a place where I would make any moves. And then ceramic fibers is landing on 350 again, 368 for the sellers, 357. No, that's still a little bit early to say we should be buying that. So a couple of perhaps small buy opportunities for the medium term. Definitely don't gamble on this to be a quick return or anything like that. And then a couple of surprise sell opportunities, fullerenes and tungsten carbide. But across the board, this actually feels like it is basically stabilizing right now in advanced moon materials. And then I gotta do a little bit of drinking, which is still just water, guys. Trying to stay healthy so I can keep going. And then we'll move on to the Tech 2 markets at 46.10, let's say. And let's see if we got any opportunities, because we do have like probably some more stable production cycles happening right now. And so I think that if that happens, we get a decent supply and potentially we could overshoot a little bit in the supply side, creating buy opportunities. First thing to notice, Aries double spike up to 32.5 million. Is now landing at 30 million, so we're talking 31 for the sellers and 27 million for the buyers. But it's noticeable, 468 here should keep this from really going back up anytime soon. And so if we are a bit more stable in advanced moon materials, if we get Aries production just back to normal levels, this could mean more competition driving the price back down. It's not there yet, but let's hope that we do get a little bit of extra dumping and another buy opportunity. The Basilisk spiked up to 240 million is also slowly recovering from that. Right now we're talking 220 million for the sellers, just a couple of ships here, back to 230, 231 pretty quickly. Less than 200 million for the buyers. I think we can go down lower again, just a half a dozen one, and we're getting towards the 190 range. So also basically in the recovery phase, where again, if this stabilizes production, then we could potentially be working on an opportunity. The Cerberus went up to 280 and is only recovering from that right now. 280 million for the sellers, 250 million for the buyers. Obviously, if you still bought together with me, trades made around the 195 million, below 200 million mark, you can try to sell right now. You can see here I sold for 260, a little bit too early, but if you follow this along on these low points of the Cerberus, you get another great sell opportunity. Next up here we get the Crow, a little bit too stable in my book, actually going up in price towards 35 million, 34 for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. The bad news is here we get another 59 coming in. That is going to stop this very quickly. Well, bad news for people that wanted high prices in the Crow, but potentially again we're seeing supplies ramp up a little bit and hopefully we get a little bit too much at some point. Same thing for the Guardian, went up to 250 again. I tried to buy for 194 and failed, so you could have done a small trade here as well. We're talking 244 million for the sellers, 220 almost for the buyers. So here, not a place to make a move unless you can sell a really cheap one, and not really a sign of that much new supply. So we need a bit of patience. The Hawk, that is very nice in volatility, of course. Low points are below 35 million, high points are at 50 million, and we're almost back at 50 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. So here again, if last week you bought Hawks for 35 and below, you can try and sell them now at a very nice profit. Very impressive. Why is this? Probably because of the skillers in the Abyss events, and so this is just confirming that Hawk PvE status, where an event that is either meant for smaller ships, or if it is an abyssal event, apparently the Hawk takes to the forefront. Lots of people want to use it, and so we get these increased volumes and these incredible sell opportunities. The Heretic staying flat at 60 million, buyers are still at 54 million. You guys know that I grabbed one at 52 million, so this again not really something that I would make a move on. And here are the stealth bombers, right? This was nice, 25 million, then up to 35 million, would have been very tradable. I unfortunately missed this one, but we are yet again going back down in price. Below 30 million for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers. And notice this 10, 21, 30, 36, 10. It is slowly starting to wrap up. Full front page of new supply as well. More than that, in fact. So here, again, my hope, my thinking is that with advanced move materials stabilizing as well, we could really see a little bit of too much supply in some of these ships and potentially another opportunity showing itself. It's just not gonna be the week for that. The Ishtar shot up to 280, is recovering just below 250 on the chart, 257 million for the sellers, 238 for the buyers. Again, new supply in the last 24 hours. 2 pages, it's not that bad. It's not enough yet to crash the price, but it is more Tech 2 coming online. Manticore, alright, this one is going well below 30 million, so who knows, perhaps he's at the forefront of this. 28 million for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. Let's get 25 million on the chart. It is pretty low. You can buy Manticores for less than 25 million if you want to take a Tech 2 purchase, this week. So far, it looks like the Manticore is in an interesting place right now. Buy it for less than 25 million. And I think you've got a potential nice trade. Up to 35 million should be pretty doable. Then we've got the Munin, try to get back to 250, but is already coming back down to 38 million for the sellers, to 15 million for the buyers. Last 24 hours, half a page, nothing crazy in the numbers, but it's definitely stalling any increase in price. The Nemesis is back up above 30 million. That's a bit of a surprise. 31 million for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. Really large margin between these two. Last 24 hours, full page with 37.27. Again, not enough to really crash the price, but it is coming online. The Oneros is stabilizing above 200 million. Lack of supply here, so this is one indication that maybe it is not happening across the board. No supply outside of Jita. And volume wise, of course, this may be the reason why the Oneros is struggling here all of a sudden. It is really not a very popular ship to be trading. After that, we've got the Purifier. That one is going back down below 30 million as well. 28 million in fact for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. New supply, not that much. So that's the bad news. In the last week here, we do have a nice batch that has crashed the price down, but things are already slowing down then for a Purifier. Still close to 25 million. You can see the upswing potential to 35 here again. You could try it, right? Just like with the Manticore here, the Purifier, you could try it, but it's really gonna depend on what happens in the upcoming weeks and if we do see a more stable Tech 2 supply. The Saber still staying at 65 million, almost for the sellers, 57 million. That still feels too high for me to try and make a move. Then we get the Scimitar, pretty stable. Also a little bit of pressure at the tail end, but pretty stable. Just above its average maybe, or around its average. 220 for the sellers, 197 for the buyers. New ships, no. I would have hoped for at least like 6 or half a page of new Scimitars, but that is not happening. So this is gonna stay pretty stable. And then the Zarmast is actually up in price a little bit. 350 million now for the sellers, 290 for most buyers, 306 for one. Pretty wide gap here in the Zarmast, but also pretty low in volumes. So not exactly completely convinced that supplies are gonna pick up, but for the smaller ships, I think we have basically the best chance that it does happen and that we get overshot a little bit, causing potentially real opportunities like here in the Manticore, a small opportunity to be seen here. But this is not the week, I think, to be doing a lot of Tech 2 ship purchases. Let's see if it's a different story in the Tech 3 ship market at 54.30. Like that. As always, we'll start with destroyers. Here is the Confessor finally recovering, landing on 40 million ISK on the chart, went up to 80 million a couple of weeks ago. Crazy spike. 41 million for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. Fresh supplies, not that much anymore now that we've reached this price, but this is a more normal range for the Confessor, and so here I'm actually a little bit surprised to already see supplies drying up, and basically we're not going to overshoot by too much. I don't see a real buy opportunity in the Confessor here just yet. Is there a guilty party? Yeah, here it is. The Hecate went to 80 million, 1, 2, 3 steps to a 1-year high point, super pronounced, in fact above 90 million on a couple of days. It is now slowly starting to recover from that. 64 million for the sellers, still a pretty big premium. 54 million for the buyers, same thing there. And this is of course where the supplies last 24 hours, there's going to be 3, maybe even 4 pages of Hecate. That is of course why the Confessor is not overshooting and going towards like a 30 million buy price. That would be a crazy opportunity. So the Hecate is still stopping that. Let's hope that basically we can crash the Hecate low enough, but it still has quite a bit of buffer before we reach that 40 million mark here as well. What's happening with the Jackdaw is also going back down, but again, because there's that much of an opportunity in the Hecate, nobody's gonna go crazy with the Jackdaws. 48 million for the sellers, 43 million for the buyers. Last 24 hours, next to nothing. So here again, not exactly a buy opportunity. And finally we get this Vapel that is actually able to defend its 50 million price range, almost that for the sellers, 44 million for the buyers. And here we do have a little bit of supply. I think there are some people that are saying, if I can still get 50 million for a Vapel, that does feel like a pretty good deal, because most are around 40 million on average, but the Vapel tends to be a little bit below that. So for the tactical destroyer market, we are still trying to recover from whatever the hell it is that happened and drove the price up to 70 and 80 million for the Confessor, and now drove the price up to 80 and even 90 million for the Hecate. I think for the Hecate it is the buff to the Tech 2 ship ammo. It's really one of those ships that could brawl because it's got that speed mode to close the distance. It can go in armor mode, it can go in DPS mode, and so it has become something that is really a very valuable weapon, I think, in larger fleet warfare. So that's, I think, what's happening for the Hecate right now. It does mean that it is having an impact on the market, and so despite the fact that the Confessor went back down very violently to 40 million ISK, what we would often see is just too much supply, and that you know, you would get that buy opportunity. It's just not materializing because, well, there's no reason to make and bring more confessors when you can make and sell Hecates for almost double the price. What's happening in the cruiser market then? The Legion. I took that gamble and potentially, so let's see if I can find it. Is it in the ticker? Yeah, I bought the Legion for 135 million ISK. I actually have it, so I'm pretty happy with that. We're back up to 148 million for the sellers. In fact, we very quickly can get towards the 160 range, and it's still around 135 for the buyers. So we have clearly here done what I was talking about in destroyer market, overshot a little bit on the downtrend, and I managed to grab one, I think, on the cheap, but it will probably take some time to actually find the right sell opportunity. Still, that's what I'm mostly looking for right now. We're already going back down a little bit, so you could still try to grab a cheap Legion just above 135 million. But yeah, don't look at this as a tweet trade, honestly, because for the cruiser market, I really don't dare to make any predictions. The Loki is continuing to go down as well, but not really crashing to that 150 range. 150 million for the first seller, 168 for most, and just below 150 for the buyers. So competition is already starting here. If you want, you can try to grab a Loki for 150 million. It is decently cheap considering where we come from, but again, know that in this cruiser market, I think manipulation is also a big part of what's happening, and so be very careful here. To me, I would have to see this average go down below the 150 million by quite a bit. Maybe try and buy these for also 135, something like that, before I'd say, yeah, that's a sure thing. Right now, it looks like we're landing before that. The Proteus is finally also coming back down. Will it overshoot? That's the real question. So 130 million. We're getting pretty close on that on the current averages. Sellers are at 135. That first buyer at 130 is spoiling the party a little bit. Otherwise, you could get that for close to 125 million. And that would have made sense, I think, if we try and get that to show up here. Well, even 120, but yeah, below 130 is definitely a pretty good price to try and grab a Proteus at. Unfortunately, competition is already coming in at this price range. And then finally we get the Tengu that is pretty stable on the chart, but first sellers are coming in now at 176 last 24 hours. You can see driving the price down from last 24, let's see here, yeah, 194 million down to 176 million, which is also part of the reason why I'm pretty hesitant in the cruiser market, because, well, just, you know, a few dozen ships can crash the price down very, very quickly. Getting the sale at a high price is going to be very difficult, basically. So unless it's super pronounced, like what was happening here with the Legion, look at that, I'm not going to take those gambles. And then finally, for the extra product, I'm actually gonna do that again because, well, we are going above an hour for this one. Not much I can do about that. 1 hour and 1 minute for gas products. Something like that. I'm not sure how I have to make that timestamp, but we'll see. This is actually a request to manufacturing and research, and then we get a gas cloud materials. I'll start with the fullerenes. Now, I don't really know enough about where you get what in order to make real judgments, but we'll just take a look, see if we can spot any trends or anything like that. And for fullerite C28, very noticeable, 1 year low point, 5,000 disc, 5,600 for the buyers and 7,000 discs for the buyers. Pretty cheap at the moment, down here somewhere. C32 is also pretty low on 15,000 disc, on average 17 for the sellers, 14,000 for the buyers. Clearly lacking in demand right here. That is very noticeable here. Maybe it's a little bit less noticeable, but that does seem to be the case here as well. The 320 on 50k as well, buyers less than that, so pretty low in demand. That seems to be the trend right here. C50 is coming back a little bit, but again, 3,000 disc is pretty much where we're coming back from, which is a 1 year low point, and again showing a clear lack of demand. 5,000 for the sellers, but buyers 3,500 disc. Pretty opportunistic. Same thing here with the C540, went down to a 1 year low point of 40,000 discs, started the year at 90k and is currently selling for 58,000, buyers at 53. A bit of competition came in here when we saw this low price, but it is still very cheap. C60 is an exception, went up to 5,000 disc, a high point, and is now recovering from that. 3,100 for the sellers, around average, but the lack of buyers is very noticeable here as well. C70 able to stay at 4,000 disc, again not that many buyers. Look at that margin, 4,750 for the sellers, 2,700 for the buyers. If you grab a buy order at this price and then just put it up for a sale right away, then that does mean that you're making a profit. Surrounding systems, not that much of an impact, down a little bit, but the volumes are much lower as well. So I would say Jita is the correct price. C72, 1 year low points, big crash here as well. Started the year at 20,000 disc and is now down to 7,200 for the first seller, 6,600 for the buyers. Again, really lacking in demand. And the C84 is just confirming the trend. I mean, it's crawling away from that low point of 2,000 disc. Bit of buy competition finally coming in here, but the structural situation is that very low prices in the fullerenes and definitely showing a lack of demand. Booster gas clouds. And I don't know this. I don't even know exactly where you get them, but we'll take a quick look. It's a lot of them, so we'll go over this a little bit more quickly, but this seems to be at the lower end, definitely below average as well. And again, coming from, god damn it, a 1 year low point here, went down to 50k and is now, no, went down to 52,000 disc and is now just recovering from that. Next one, clearly at the lower end of its range as well. All right, an exception, Azure Cytocerocin or something like that. A little bit of a lack of supply, going up to 140,000 disc. Buyers at 80,000 and 75,000. Again, look at that massive margin, but supply really dictating the price. Trade volumes though, kind of not very stable. Let's see what this is. This is pretty low, not really too tradable. This is around average, not much to say. Another one that's down at a low point. Golden stuff again recovering from a 1 year low point here. This one around average, a little bit below average, definitely below average. Recovering, but again, look at that, went to 50,000 and below. If you look at his full chart, really cheap. So this is just a little bit of speculation coming in to try and grab the cheap goods here. Same thing here, look at that, very, very noticeable that across the board in gas it is not the best time to try and sell, because we just don't have the demand for it. Now, can't give you guys too many reasons or anything like that. First thing that would come to mind is increased activity, and it is fun actually to dive down into a wormhole, grab some gas, get back out there, try to sell it. Something that I think alpha clones can try to do as well. And as a result, potentially something that is seeing more supply than is needed for the market right now, because of people trying to do that and managing to bring supplies to the market, especially in the fullerenes though. Very noticeable that we're talking cheap prices and a real lack of demand, just like basically in the PI material, but much more uniform. A little bit of recovery, but from 1 year low points here and there, but other than that, clearly well below average in the gas cloud materials. And that's going to be it for this ETH talk, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.